All right. Hello, everyone. Today we are going to do a breakdown of incentives for a solar installation for a company, not a residential system, a commercial system. We're going to look at this company's basic finances and see if they qualify for a lot of the incentives that are found in our local area, which our local area is Newton County, Missouri. And today's date is 4/19 of 2023. So by tomorrow, this information could theoretically be outdated. Incentives change frequently. If you're watching this in the future, these incentives could be better for you. If you're watching in the future, they could be worse for you. However, many of these will be very, very similar. You may not qualify for every one of the ones that we're getting ready to mention. We are going to talk about, the best case scenarios. There are companies out there who will qualify for every one of these incentives, and most of these incentives would be able to be used by most companies in Newton County, Missouri. So we'll get started. The company that we're going to use, we're going to call it Company X. So, Paige, if you would, at the top of our board, write Company X. Company X is a fairly decent sized company. A lot of people, they get confused on what is a small business, what is a mid-sized business, what is a large business. Anything less than 500 employees is considered to be a small business, and that's what we're talking about: is small businesses, 500 employees or less, that would be located in Newton County, Missouri. The best candidates would also have an electric bill of about $1,500 per month or more, because that's approximately the savings that you would see from the size of system that we are considering installing. Every month that the 100 kW system would operate, the customer would see about $1,500 per month in reduced energy costs from their electric bill. We're actually not going to get that concerned today with that energy cost savings. We're actually going to be talking about the incentives that are not based upon the production from your system. This is just from putting the system in. So let's say that Company X, they have $1 million of revenue in their average year. Well, a company with $1 million of revenue that is a reasonably profitable company, they should see about 10% of their revenue in the form of profits. This would be after their overhead is paid for, like their office locations. Their electric bill has been paid. Their staff has been paid. They're left with about $100,000 in taxable income. Might even be referred to as profits. So let's go ahead and write that down. $100,000 in profits for a year. That's about a 10% profit margin, and that's pretty standard for many companies today. Some have numbers much higher than that. Some aren't profitable no matter how much money they make. But out of that $100,000 in profits, this company is going to have to pay taxes. Now, the current corporate tax rate, I believe, is higher than 21%, but we're going to go with 21%, which means that of that $100,000, they had to pay $21,000 in taxes, which meant that after their tax burden was paid, they would be left, and if my math is correct here, they'd be left with $79,000 that they could distribute to their owners. All right, so $79,000 of that $1 million would end up getting distributed to the owners in the form of equity, owner equity. All right. So we are going to look at what would their financials look like year after year if they put in a solar electric system. How many years would it take before those incentives would all get paid for, and they would no longer be out of pocket more money than they would have saved by that solar electric system? Standard investments for a lot of people is about 10 years. In other words, if I bought a piece of equipment, I would expect that using that equipment over a 10-year time period should not only pay for that equipment, but I should also make 10% every year off of my investment from that equipment. So over 10 years, the equipment would repay for itself and then basically double in the income that it's come back to me. Um, with a solar electric system, MAS, we're not going to sell you a solar electric system if it won't pay for itself in less than 10 years. Just not worth it to us. There's lots of customers out there that their system will pay for itself in far less than 10 years. But that's kind of our corporate standard. You are not a good candidate for a solar electric system if the costs of that system over the next 10 years are greater than the savings of that system over the next 10 years. And we have enough integrity that we will tell you that. You're just not a good candidate. For most customers, that time period is going to get down to a couple of years if they qualify and can benefit from the incentives that we're getting ready to discuss. So, Paige, why don't you hop over on this board and write 100,000 watt 3-phase system. This system is going to cost about $250,000 for the racking, the modules, the balance of system components, the safety equipment like disconnects and module level shutdown requirements, and the interconnection requirements. However, this is not going to provide any energy storage. And to really see a lot of the benefits that customers hope to see, energy storage is pretty important. So we're going to go ahead and add an additional $50,000 to this system. So at 100,000 watts for $2.50 per watt, the initial system would be about $250,000. Add an additional $50,000 to that, and total out-of-pocket cost would be about $300,000. So right off the bat, if our customer, go ahead and put times $2.50. Yeah, and then put a plus symbol for the $50,000. And our total under there would be about $300,000. That means that if you wanted MAS to come install a solar electric system that was 100 kW, 3-phase with inverters, all the equipment, along with about $50,000 worth of energy storage to provide backup power when their power was down, or for load shaving to reduce your critical demand charge, those charges can get pretty high by themselves. All in told, you'd have to write us a check for about $300,000. Now, to a lot of people, they're like, wow, that's a lot of money, $300,000 to save $1,500 per month off of my electric bill. If I just did some basic math, and I got a handy calculator here, and I took $300,000 and I divided it by $1,500 in savings every month, it's going to take 200 months for that system to pay for itself, simply off of energy production. That is 16.6 years. So if you receive no incentives whatsoever, it's going to be more than 15 years for your system to pay for itself. And that's the reason that the federal government, the state government, your utilities, many organizations have stepped in and said, let's give some additional incentives up front to lower this cost down. So the very first thing that everybody is going to qualify for is a 30% tax credit. Now, this is a tax credit, not a tax deduction. So what does that mean, and what would that math look like? Well, if I'm going to take $300,000 and I'm going to multiply it times 30%, well, that'd be like $90,000, I believe, if my math is correct. Paige, how much is 30% of $300,000? That's $90,000. That means that if I am company X and I installed a solar electric system in the year of 2023 before December 31st, that when I file my taxes in 2024, I'm going to reduce this taxable this taxable amount of $21,000. I could actually reduce that by $90,000. I get a $90,000 tax credit. All right. Now, fortunately, I don't have to use all of that tax credit savings in the first year. I can actually carry that tax credit over for several years. All right. But right off the bat, my system cost has come from $300,000 down to, yeah, $210,000. Right off of the bat, I'm down to $210,000 because of my tax credit. Every person in Newton County, Missouri, every person in the United States, if they have a tax burden, whether they are an individual or they are a company, they can benefit from that tax credit. A company could benefit from the investment tax credit of 30%. And a private residence could also benefit from a 30% tax credit. All right. If your company does not have a very large tax burden, you could actually qualify for the investment tax credit. That's a whole separate tax credit that instead of getting paid this 30% next April or March when you file your taxes, you would get a rebate of a certain amount every quarter for the next 10 years. If you're interested in knowing how that would look for your company, don't hesitate to reach out to us and we can help you identify how the investment tax credit could actually put more money in your pocket over a 10-year time period than the production tax credit. I made a mistake there, so rewind that. The production tax credit instead of the investment tax credit. The investment tax credit is 30%. Quickly, the production tax credit is a little bit of money every quarter for 10 years after your system is functioning. That could actually add up to significantly more depending on where you fall. So if you've got questions about that production tax credit related to the investment tax credit, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're happy to help you identify exactly what those numbers are and what they look like. But this math is really simple. Everybody qualifies for it if they've got the taxable burden. All right, but there's other tax incentives that we can get. In fact, there's a special map that we can get your address and we can look up and see if you qualify for. That's an additional 10% for businesses. Many parts of Newton County, Missouri qualify for this additional 10% tax credit. What is that called? Remember off the top of your head?
I don't.
Yeah.
There's several factors in that map.
Sure. Yeah. But I know that many of our areas in Newton County, Missouri, do qualify. So let's look if your business was one of those businesses. You qualify for an extra 10%. That's an extra $30,000 in tax credit. Um, I think it's called an energy zone. It's parts of the country that had higher energy prices in comparison to their wages. Again, we're happy to help you identify if you do qualify for that. In fact, Tyler, if you've got an opportunity, you might go ahead and put links here at this point to show the customer how to find that information out for themselves if they want to. 10% adder for energy communities. All right, so now we are up to $120,000 in savings, or we're only out of pocket for $180,000 for this particular company. All right, let's also look at the REAP grant. It is REAP. This is a grant that you really need to be concerned about for time sensitivity. The deadline for this grant currently is June 30th, 2023. So if you're watching this video and it's later than June 30th, 2023, feel free to check out the REAP grants or Rural Energy Program. That rural energy program last year was only 25% incentive. There was a deadline that was March 30th of this year that you could receive a 40% incentive. The incentive that we're discussing that is due before June 30th is a 50% incentive. That means that if you applied for, qualified, and received this grant, they would write you a check back for 50% of the qualifying project costs. All of Newton County, Missouri, even if you are not an agricultural producer, has the opportunity to qualify for this grant. Nonprofit entities don't really see a benefit from this. So if you're a school or a church, this wouldn't apply to you. But if you are a for-profit entity, 50% of this $300,000 would mean that you would be eligible for a $150,000 cash refund from the REAP grant. So, Paige, let's go ahead and add that math in there. 50% of our project for a REAP grant, and we have now lowered our project cost to about $30,000 if my math looks right. All right. Yeah. Yeah. So we have $270,000 worth of tax credits, not tax deductions, tax credits, or grant incentives. Now you might ask yourself, what are the chances that if I apply for this REAP grant that I actually get it? Well, last year, 81 out of 81 Missouri applicants that applied for the REAP grant got the REAP grant. I like those odds. So we're just now starting to get to some incentives that $30,000 out of pocket cost left. Okay, or total savings. So the last incentive depends on your electric company. Which electric company do you have? You could have an electrical co-op, Newmac Electric, Berry County Electric. Those would be some examples of electric cooperatives. But in Newton County, Missouri, we also have a for-profit entity known as Liberty Utilities. Liberty Utilities has a 25-cent per watt cash rebate, and it is paid very, very quickly. In other words, if you put a system in the following billing period, you are paid back your cash incentive. Well, we have a 100,000 watt system. Multiply that times 25 cents per watt, and Liberty Utilities could be or would be writing you a check for $25,000. So when we subtract that out of our $30,000 cost, we are down to $5,000 out of pocket expense for a business installing a 100 kW 3-phase solar electric system with $50,000 of energy storage added to it. I'm going to guess that somebody watching this video has $5,000 they're willing to put down to get in line for these systems. Because if your system doesn't get completed before December 31st, you can't qualify for all these incentives. We are forming a line right now. If you don't apply before June 30th, then you're not going to get this round of REAP grant. And the next round might not be before the end of October or the end of this year. These are time-sensitive grant and incentive processes. Here's the other concern. There's only so much money to fund these programs. When the money's gone, you will have to wait until more money is allocated, which means the first people to apply are the first people to get paid. I like my money sooner rather than later. So when I look at all these tax incentives, I'm down to $5,000 out of pocket. But the reality is, I actually had to pay $300,000 to get this system installed. So I have $300,000 worth of equipment that I can actually depreciate. Now, there's special depreciation rules also. Basically, these get complicated. But let's say you qualified for all of these grants and tax credits. Half of the incentive that you got for the tax credits have to be used to reduce your out-of-pocket cost. In other words, I got 90 plus 30, I got $120,000 in tax credits. Half of that, $60,000, has to be reduced from my out-of-pocket expense. So I started with $300,000, but in all reality, I will only be able to depreciate $240,000 of that. What does that actually mean to depreciate it? Well, remember this number up here that says that I made $100,000 in profits? Well, if I could depreciate $100,000, I would have saved $21,000 in taxes because I pay 21% tax margin. Well, I can take 21% of that $240,000 and I will still see that as a tax incentive. So if I take 240,000 and multiply it times 0.21, Paige, you can add in an additional $50,400 for depreciation directly underneath those other savings. That'd be $50,400. Now, if you would, add up the total incentives that either the state government, the federal government, or the utilities have given you to install a solar electric system. When will you get these? Well, your depreciation for 2023 is rapid depreciated, which means that you can get 80% of that total the first year. Take the other 20% of it the next year. But you don't have to. What if you don't have that taxable liability? Because you can carry depreciation over indefinitely. Until you need to use the depreciation, you don't have to use the depreciation. And so, for a business that is used to paying taxes every year, installing a solar electric system will reduce their taxable burden by enough that they may not have to pay taxes for multiple years. Well, what does that mean for their payback time? Until you actually get the reduction in taxes, you're not truly seeing the benefit. This is part of why it's fake news whenever you see advertisements that say free solar. There is no such thing as a free solar electric system, guys. You paid $300,000, but over the course of 2, 3, or 4 years, even without the production of electricity, the government is going to pay you back $345,000. That's why it does seem like the government is actually buying solar electric systems for people. And these gimmicky companies will make it seem like, oh, there's no money out of pocket, no cost to you whatsoever. Sure, because they're going to loan you that $300 and then they're going to charge you a 7% interest on it until you get back all of these savings and then you pay it off. Sure, you're never out of pocket any money. And if that's the best route for you, would be happy to find a financial program for you that would provide the financing for your program. And you will never be out of pocket any money. It'll seem like solar was free to you. In reality, you financed that solar electric system. And once your incentives came back, you paid it off. But you will easily be able to do that within a couple of years. So this company up here, this company X that makes $1,000,000 but only has $100,000 worth of profits each year and pays $21,000 in taxes. Their savings, it'd be pretty unrealistic to say that they could actually save more than $21,000 per year. They're getting about $120,000 in tax savings. What does that mean? It might take 4 or 5 years of the tax savings for them to actually get their money back. But they will absolutely get their money back with those tax savings. Guys, I know that this is complicated. It can seem convoluted or risky because I don't know if my company really fits this model. We are professionals. This is what we do for a living. Give us the opportunity to help you. What do we need to do that? We need your last year's worth of electric bills to size and design a system for you properly. We need to know your address, which should be on that electric bill, to know what location you are at, and we can look at our maps to determine what incentives you might qualify for. If you really want to be proactive, let's set up a meeting with your accountant so that your accountant can ask us questions directly and we can make sure that you and they understand how to see the maximum financial benefits from this system as quickly as possible. Because next year, these incentives will not look this good. There's no such thing as free solar, but there are a lot of people in the country that are going to get solar electric systems this year. And even if their system never produced 1 kilowatt hour of electricity, their system will pay for itself within the next couple of years. Hopefully, hopefully, you'll let us help you be one of those companies or entities